I wasn't supposed to be home that early. That Friday afternoon had been blocked off for a site walkthrough with a contractor north of Santa Fe, but he bailed last minute. Something about a delivery delay. Normally, I'd head back to the studio and catch up on design work, but instead, I found myself pulling into the parking lot of Luna Bakery. It was half impulse, half muscle memory. Kimberly loved their pastries, the flaky guava ones with powdered sugar that always ended up on her shirt, and she'd pretend to be annoyed while grinning. I grabbed her favorite cinnamon latte too, extra oat milk, light foam, just the way she liked it. I figured it'd be a nice surprise. Just a small, normal act of love, something quiet and warm in a routine marriage. But even as I turned onto our street, I felt a strange tightness in my chest. I brushed it off. Long week. Stress. Maybe I was hoping the little surprise would break the emotional distance that had been creeping in lately. We hadn't fought exactly, but things had been off. Our house sat quiet when I pulled into the driveway. Kimberly's car was there, just like it should be. From the outside, everything looked the same, shutters open, flower beds freshly watered. Inside, the air felt still, too still. The kind of silence that doesn't sit naturally in a home. I pushed the door open gently, careful not to spill the coffee. The smell of vanilla and sage wafted in from the candle she liked to burn upstairs. That's when I heard it, a man's voice. Low. Laughing. Then hers, light, bubbly, carefree in a way I hadn't heard in a long time. I stopped in the hallway, heart thudding. It wasn't loud, but it was close. Upstairs. For a second, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a Zoom call. Maybe she had someone over from work. But I hadn't heard her mention any visitors. No scheduled meetings. No, hey, just a heads-up message. I set the bag and drink on the side table and started up the stairs, each step somehow heavier than the last. I didn't make a sound. I wasn't trying to sneak, not exactly. I just didn't want to alert whoever was up there. Not yet. The voices got clearer as I reached the top. They were coming from the balcony attached to our bedroom. I crept down the hall and stopped just before the open door. Kimberly stood near the railing, laughing, her body angled toward a man sitting on the lounge chair beside her. He looked relaxed, confident, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair and a collared shirt half unbuttoned. His arm was slung around her waist, casual, like it belonged there. She didn't pull away immediately. In fact, she leaned into it just for a second. Then she gently brushed his arm off, not with panic, but with that same kind of flirty smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. Then I heard her say it. My husband might be back soon. My stomach flipped. I stepped into the doorway, clearing my throat, though I didn't need to. He'd already spotted me. The man stood up instantly, not hurried, but purposeful. He didn't say anything, just nodded slightly as he passed by me and walked down the stairs like this was routine. Kimberly stayed rooted in place, her arms now folded tightly across her chest. Her entire posture changed the second he left, as if a different version of her had just clocked back in. Oh my God, she said sharply. Trevor, what are you doing home? Her tone wasn't guilt. It was irritation. The meeting got canceled, I said. Thought I'd surprise you. I gestured toward the bag and coffee still sitting downstairs. She didn't look. That was Matt. He's a coworker, she said flatly, like I just interrupted a business seminar. He came by to go over some concept sketches. We were working out here because the light is better. There was a flicker in her eyes, like she was waiting for me to make a scene. When I didn't, she continued. You always do this, she said, her voice rising just enough to sting. You twist everything into something it's not. It's exhausting. I didn't say anything, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I just walked in. Yeah, and the look on your face said everything, she snapped. I can't even have a conversation with a coworker now? I opened my mouth but stopped. There was no point. I could feel it in my gut, that tight, sickening twist that comes when reality shifts under your feet. Something was wrong. Really wrong. And I couldn't unsee what I just saw. I didn't mean to interrupt, I said quietly. I'll get out of your way. Unbelievable, she muttered as I turned toward the stairs. Next time maybe you'll text before barging in like that. I didn't respond. I walked back down, picked up the coffee still warm, and carried it outside. I sat in my truck for 10, maybe 15 minutes before driving off. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there. As I drove around aimlessly, trying to piece together what I had just witnessed, small memories started flashing in my mind. All the moments I'd brushed off, explained away, or tried to forget. Her sudden late nights, the new perfume she wore, the way she stopped kissing me goodbye in the mornings, how she'd beg *N wearing silk pajamas, the ones she once claimed were too cold and too fussy, how she now kept her phone on silent. always face down, always locked. I thought about the way she pulled away in bed, how our conversations had dwindled into logistics, bills, groceries, chores. I couldn't remember the last time she asked me how I was doing. Not really. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. I wasn't sure what hurt more, that she might be seeing someone else, or that I wasn't even sure she'd care if I found out. That afternoon, I ended up parking at a lookout point just outside town. The sun was beginning to dip behind the hills, casting the whole desert in a gold-red haze. I sat there, drinking the coffee I had bought for her, now lukewarm, and watching shadows stretch long across the landscape. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there feeling erased. Whatever that moment on the balcony was, it wasn't innocent. I didn't care what she said. You don't put your arm around someone like that, you don't laugh like that if you're just colleagues. You don't tell someone your husband might be back soon unless that's a problem. And when you're confronted, you don't act like the offended party unless you've got something to hide. I didn't have proof, not yet. But in that moment I knew. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't imagining things. I just caught the first crack in the foundation. And for the first time in our marriage, I realized I didn't trust her. After that day, everything changed, but not in the way I expected. Kimberly acted like nothing had happened. She didn't bring up the balcony incident. She didn't apologize. She didn't even ask where I went after I left. It was as if she'd mentally erased the whole thing and expected me to follow suit. But I couldn't. I walked through our house differently after that. Every room felt off, like I was stepping into someone else's life. The walls still held our wedding photos. Her shoes still cluttered the front entry like always, and yet none of it felt like mine anymore. I started noticing details I had ignored before, things that didn't make sense on their own, but together began to form a picture I didn't want to look at. Started with her phone. Kimberly used to leave it charging in the kitchen overnight. Now it was always with her, even in the bathroom, even when she showered. I noticed how she'd tilt the screen away when I walked into a room, how she stopped letting it ring out loud. Every call was suddenly nothing or just work. Then came the laptop. She started bringing it to bed, something she never did before. At first, it was for late-night reports. Then it was research for some presentation. Eventually, it was just always there, glowing faint blue while she typed with her back turned slightly to me. If I looked her way, she'd close it or change tabs without breaking conversation. And the wardrobe, that changed too. Slowly at first. Little things. A new blouse that dipped lower than she normally liked. Heels she had once said hurt her feet. Then a bold red lipstick I didn't recognize. When I complimented her, half sincere, half curious, she just smiled and said, "Trying new things?" One night I asked if she wanted to catch a movie downtown. Nothing big, just something light to get us out of the house. She didn't even look up from her screen. "Can't," she said. "Big client presentation Monday. Maybe next week." But she didn't work late that night. At least not at home. Around 9, she suddenly needed to go meet Rachel for a wine night. No prior mention. Just got dressed, grabbed her coat, and left in a hurry. I waited up, trying not to text, trying not to spiral. She came home after midnight smelling like mint gum and something expensive. Too expensive to be Rachel's usual boxed Merlot. "Everything okay?" I asked. She mumbled, walking past me. She didn't ask about my day. She hadn't in weeks. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized it hadn't just been weeks. It had been months. It was in the way she avoided eye contact when I said, "I love you." The way she no longer lingered in the kitchen with me while I made breakfast. The way her laugh had returned, but only when she was texting someone. I remember her work retreat back in February. A weekend in Taos, supposedly for team building and leadership exercises. No photos. Phone off most of the time. She came back tan and glowing and somehow annoyed by everything I did for the next 3 days. Or the spa day in Albuquerque she booked last minute in March. When I asked if I could join for the drive down, make a day of it, she rolled her eyes and said, "I just need to breathe without being responsible for someone else." That one stuck with me. Then there was her birthday. I had planned a surprise dinner, our favorite place, a few close friends. She canceled on the spot. Said she wasn't in the mood and needed to be around people who actually understood her. I had laughed it off, made a self-deprecating joke, but later that night, I sat on the couch and stared at the dark TV screen long after she had gone to bed. Who were these people who understood her? Because I certainly didn't anymore. The memories snowballed after that. A dozen little things I had brushed off in real time, the sudden love for sushi when she used to hate raw fish, the boutique perfumes I hadn't bought her, the club membership she never used. The way she'd started referring to herself as Kim to everyone except me. And the final piece of it all, how I didn't recognize the tone of her voice when she was on the phone anymore. It was softer, more playful. She never sounded like that with me. One Saturday morning while she was out for brunch with Chloe, I opened her jewelry drawer to find something, anything that might make sense of what I was feeling. I wasn't proud of myself, but I was desperate. I found a necklace I didn't recognize. Delicate, silver, and definitely new. The tag was still in the box, boutique shop in Aspen. She hadn't been to Aspen. Or so I thought. The pieces kept stacking. The timeline stretched backward in my mind like a crime scene corkboard, and every thread led to one conclusion: she wasn't just drifting. She was building a second life, one I had no part in. And what cut the deepest wasn't just the possibility of someone else. It was the realization that I was no longer part of her story. We shared a house, yes. We paid bills. We coordinated schedules. But somewhere along the line, we'd stopped being a partnership and started being an arrangement. A convenience. A placeholder. I remember asking her once, years ago, if she believed in soulmates. She had laughed and said, "I believe in seasons. Some people are only meant to walk with you part of the way." At the time, I thought she was being poetic. Wise, even. Now it sounded like a pre-written excuse. But I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I still held out some ridiculous hope that I was wrong. That maybe the man on the balcony really was a coworker. That maybe the photos she never posted, the excuses, the deflections, they were all coincidental. But deep down I knew. The way you know when a storm's coming even before you see clouds. And yet I didn't act. Not immediately. Instead, I started to document. A quiet, methodical part of me took over. I made a list of trips, nights out, excuses she gave. I took note of the changes in her routines, her mood swings, her increasingly dismissive responses. I backed up copies of our financial records. I started checking our shared credit card statements more often. I was collecting pieces not to prove something to her, but to prove it to myself. Because if I was going to face the truth, I needed it to be undeniable. I needed it to be concrete. Because the alternative was too cruel to bear. That maybe I'd spent the last 2 years loving a version of her that no longer existed. Or worse, that maybe she had never truly been who I thought she was. It wasn't some grand, cinematic moment that pushed me over the edge. It was quiet. Subtle. Just a Tuesday night when Kimberly forgot to log out of the family laptop. She'd been using her own MacBook for everything lately, even casual browsing. That night, though, she was in a rush, late for a yoga class she'd only recently joined, and left her tea cooling on the table, laptop open. When I saw the screen flicker into sleep mode, something inside me clicked. I waited until the house was silent. Then I sat down and opened the lid. It was logged into a blank Word doc, nothing interesting. But I wasn't after what was visible. I was after what she tried to bury. For weeks, maybe months, I'd gone back and forth in my head. Was I overreacting? Was I inventing betrayal out of insecurity? But after the balcony moment, after all the small things adding up, I didn't want theories anymore. I needed the truth. So I downloaded a recovery tool, something basic, nothing fancy. Just enough to retrieve deleted files from the hard drive. I told myself if nothing came up, I'd stop. I'd put the laptop away and chalk it up to stress. The scan took over an hour. I sat in the dark, listening to the quiet hum of the fan, my heart beating louder than the device itself. And then it happened. The file names started appearing. Most were innocuous, work drafts, invoices, spreadsheets. But then I found a zip archive called Aspen_trip_backup. I didn't even remember her going to Aspen. I opened it slowly. The folder held over a dozen JPEGs. Most were scenic, snowy streets, mountain views, sh*TS from a cabin balcony. But the seventh image stopped me cold. It was her. In a pool. The water glowed blue, steam rising in gentle curls. Kimberly was leaning back against a man's chest. His arms were draped casually around her as she tilted her head toward him, eyes half closed, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. He looked familiar, but it took me a second to place him. Then I did. The man from our balcony. The one she'd said was a coworker. The image was timestamped 6 months earlier. A poolside selfie followed. The same man. The same Kimberly. both wearing robes, leaning close. At the bottom, in white Helvetica overlay, was a caption that read, "You were right, I live with him." It wasn't clear who sent it or what the context was, but the message had been sent to a contact named Matt. I froze. The name didn't register immediately, but as I clicked into the metadata and saw the full file path, it hit me like a truck. Matt Harrison. I hadn't heard that name in years, but I knew it. Kimberly had told me about him once, years ago. Her ex from Chicago. The one who left her right before she moved to New Mexico. She said it was over, that he was part of her old story, that she'd closed that chapter. But now that chapter was back and apparently had been reopened for a while. I clicked deeper into the archive. More photos, receipts, *TS of hotel bookings. It was all there like a personal scrapbook of their affair. The worst part? She had paid for half of it using our joint account. I felt sick. I opened the text log app, one that pulled fragments from synced iMessages. It was partially corrupted, but enough remained. A message from her to Matt 3 months ago. Can't believe he still doesn't suspect anything. One from Matt, timestamped weeks later. Soon, baby. Just a few more steps. You deserve this life. Another from her. I feel like a ghost in my own home, and one that shattered whatever hope I had left. I used to think he was the one. Now I can barely look at him without lying. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, the laptop screen glowing in the dark, illuminating the collapse of my marriage in quiet, clinical detail. So this was it. She wasn't lost. She wasn't confused. She was gone. Every fight, every late night, every cold shoulder, it wasn't detachment. It was replacement. I hadn't been her partner for months. I'd been her cover. A detail to manage. A role to play. She didn't even try to hide it well. Somewhere in her, maybe she wanted me to find out. Maybe she was too tired to keep pretending. Or maybe she thought I wouldn't dare look. But I did. I backed up the files. Uploaded everything to a secure drive. Then I closed the laptop, placed it exactly how she'd left it, and went to bed. She got home late, too late for yoga. Said nothing. Just slid into bed beside me like it was any other night. I lay there, stiff and silent, staring at the ceiling. Her breathing slowed into sleep within minutes. She had no idea what I knew. No clue that everything she'd hidden was now exposed. No idea that the life she thought was stitched together with secrecy had just unraveled completely. I didn't speak. I didn't touch her. I didn't sleep. The next morning, she made coffee like usual. Hummed along to her playlist in the kitchen. Wore the necklace from Aspen. Kissed my cheek without looking into my eyes. And I let her. Because I wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. I had all the proof I needed. The facts, the files, the photos. Now I just needed time. Time to figure out what to do next. Time to accept that I wasn't her husband anymore. Just the last person to find out. The next morning I left before she woke up. No note. No explanation. Just grabbed my overnight bag, wallet, and keys. I didn't even take a change of clothes. I drove to my parents' old house out in Lammy, the one we'd been trying to sell for 2 years and hadn't touched since Dad passed. It still smelled like dust and sagebrush. The pipes clanked when I turned on the water. But it was quiet. And for the first time in what felt like months, I could hear myself think. Kimberly texted around 10 a.m. Kimberly. Hey? Where are you? Everything okay? I stared at it. Then turned my phone off. Over the next few days, I didn't answer any of her calls or messages. I lived off canned beans and toast, wrapped myself in old quilts, and watched the wind carve patterns in the dust outside. There was no anger, just numbness. A slow drip of grief replacing the adrenaline that had carried me through the discovery. I kept replaying the evidence in my mind, the photo of her in the pool, the message, "You were right, I live with him." She'd meant it metaphorically, of course. But that line felt literal now. I was a cardboard cutout of a husband in a house she'd already vacated emotionally. By the 4th day, I drove back to the city. She wasn't home. I moved through the house like a stranger, only touching what I needed: passport, birth certificate, a few legal files. On my way out, I passed the bedroom. Something drew me in. I opened her jewelry drawer, the one she always kept meticulously organized. And that's when I saw it. A ring. Not her wedding band, she hadn't worn that in weeks, but something new. Thin gold, elegant, with a small sapphire set into it. Inside, engraved delicately. M+K. I stared at it, letting the weight of those 2 initials sink in. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't careless. It was intentional. Committed. She'd made her choice long before I found the proof. This wasn't a mistake. This was a second life. I didn't touch the ring. I didn't take anything that didn't belong to me. I just closed the drawer and stood there until I felt something break. Not in rage, not in sorrow, but in finality. I had lost. And it wasn't even a fair fight. I'd been swinging at shadows while she was already rebuilding elsewhere. And maybe that's what made the decision easy. The next morning I filed for divorce. I didn't tell her in person. I didn't scream or beg or ask why. I just had the paperwork served at her office. She tried calling, left voicemail after voicemail, some frantic, some composed, some angry. I didn't listen to a single one. I waived property division. I waived spousal support. I even told my lawyer she could have the house. I just wanted out. Clean. Fast. No courtroom drama. To the outside world, it probably looked like I was folding. But to me, it was the first time I felt control. I didn't want pieces of a life that had been built on lies. I didn't want to fight for the facade. I wanted distance. I wanted a name that didn't make her flinch. I wanted a version of myself that didn't need to be tolerated. But it didn't end cleanly. Because that's not how life works. It was Olivia who took the first blow. She called 2 days after Kimberly received the papers. Voice tight, guarded. "Dad," she said, "we need to talk." I had been bracing myself for that. Our daughter had always been closer to her mom. Same sarcasm, same spark. But I still hoped she'd understand. I met her at the park near her college campus. She showed up in a hoodie and jeans, arms folded like armor. "You just left," she said. "I had to," I replied. "You didn't talk to her. You didn't even try to fix it." My chest tightened. "Olivia, there's more going on than you know." She looked away, biting her lip. "Mom told me about Aspen," she said finally. "She said you spied on her. Broke into her stuff." I felt the heat rise in my face, but I kept my voice calm. "Did she tell you about the man in the pictures? The ring with someone else's initials?" Olivia was silent. "She said you made her feel like a prisoner," she whispered. "That you didn't see her anymore. That you," she stopped herself. "That I what?" I asked. "That you stopped being you. That she tried, but you wouldn't meet her halfway." It felt like being kicked while already on the ground. "Liv," I said gently. "Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I walked away for fun?" "I don't know," she snapped. "But she said she was drowning and you never noticed." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Because she was right, at least partly. I hadn't noticed. I'd been so caught up in work, in paying bills, in keeping things together, that I stopped looking for cracks. But even then, infidelity wasn't a misstep. It was a detour. A choice. And now it was a canyon between us. "I just thought," Olivia said, her voice cracking, "I thought our family was stronger than this." "So did I whispered. She nodded, slowly, and stood to leave. "She deserves to be happy," she said, not looking back. And with that she walked away. I sat on that bench for an hour after she left, staring at the spot where she'd been. I thought losing my marriage would be the hardest part. It wasn't. It was losing my daughter's trust. That night, I returned to my parents' house. I didn't cry. Not really. But I stared at the ceiling until the sun came up, wondering how many versions of myself I'd lost in the past year. The husband. The father. The safe bet. The steady one. All gone. But somewhere inside, beneath the rubble, a question stirred. What now? I stayed in Lammy longer than I'd planned. Originally, I'd meant for it to be a weekend, just enough time to clear my head, process the fallout. But days turned into weeks. I started fixing things around the property. Repaired a broken window. Cleared out old tools. Even restored my father's workbench under the creaky shed awning. Manual labor had a way of anchoring my thoughts, something my grief needed desperately. Kimberly didn't follow up after the divorce went through. I never saw her signature. The lawyer confirmed everything had been filed. The house was hers now, along with the furniture, the accounts, the routines. I imagined she made space in the closet for Matt's clothes not long after. Olivia didn't call either. And I didn't reach out. Instead, I made a decision. I wasn't going back to Santa Fe. The studio, my small but loyal landscaping business, had been more than a job. It had been my identity for nearly a decade. But I couldn't stomach walking past clients who knew me as Kimberly's husband. I couldn't be Trevor Blake, the man with the perfect lawn and the broken marriage. So I shut it down. I sold the business name, liquidated the equipment, and quietly left town with everything that would fit in the back of my pickup. I didn't have a plan. Just a map, a savings account, and the sharp clarity that comes from losing everything. Phoenix wasn't part of the plan, exactly. I stopped there on my way to somewhere else and ended up staying. Maybe it was the warmth. Or the anonymity. Or the fact that every person I met had no idea what I'd been through. I could say I just moved here and that was it. No one asked for more. I rented a small studio behind a hardware store and started sketching again. That was something I hadn't done in years, not for clients, but for myself. Cactus gardens. Drought-resistant yards. Modular outdoor furniture for people who cared about sustainability. The ideas came quickly. The execution took longer. But piece by piece I rebuilt. I called it Terraform Workshop, small, efficient, local. I printed business cards on recycled paper and handed them out at farmers markets. I built sample displays on vacant lots and talked to people like we were neighbors. Because in a way, we were. Within 6 months, I had my first few clients. A retired couple with an eco-cabin. A young architect looking to integrate vertical gardens into urban housing. A local cafe owner who wanted a green rooftop to cut down on cooling costs. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. And I liked who I was becoming. One afternoon in late April, I was potting succulents in the back of the studio when I heard the chime on the front door. I didn't expect anyone, I had no appointments. Dad? I turned around so fast I nearly dropped a tray of aloe. There she was. Olivia. She looked older somehow. Not in years, but in weight, like life had pressed harder on her since we last spoke. She was wearing a gray t-shirt with paint stains and holding a rolled-up blueprint tube under her arm. Hey, I said, breath catching in my throat. She smiled, tentative. You're hard to find, you know that? I set the tray down. I wasn't trying to hide. Could have fooled me, she said, half teasing. We stood there, staring. Then she stepped forward and hugged me. I don't know how long we stood like that, but it felt like someone stitching a torn seam, slow, careful, healing. She pulled back and said, I brought something. She unrolled the blueprint across my work table. It was a campus proposal for a student-run sustainability initiative, graywater reuse systems, vertical herb gardens, compost stations. At the top, written in her looping handwriting, inspired by Trevor Blake. You did this? I asked, running my fingers across the paper. She nodded. Design capstone. They loved it. I blinked fast, trying to stay composed. I thought you sided with your mom, I said quietly. I did, she admitted. I thought she needed support. And I thought you gave up on her too fast. I nodded. That's fair. But then I saw what you built. And I realized you didn't give up. You just stopped waiting for someone who already left. We sat on opposite sides of the workbench and talked until the sun started casting long shadows through the windows. About her thesis. Her friends. The parts of the divorce she hadn't wanted to talk about back then. Then she said, would you ever want to expand? Like, add another branch to Terraform? Maybe one focused on green systems for schools and public spaces. I stared at her, surprised. You want to work with me? I want to build something real, she said. With someone who sees things clearly. And just like that, it clicked. She wasn't just visiting. She was choosing to rebuild too. We spent the next few weeks working side by side, sketching, researching, presenting our first collaborative bid for a small community garden funded by a local nonprofit. We didn't win the contract. But the process brought us back together, stronger this time. I saw it in her eyes when she talked to clients. I saw it in the way she introduced herself as Olivia Blake, systems designer. I saw it in the way she asked about my projects, not out of obligation, but out of pride. We started going to networking events together, pitching ideas that blended her generation's urgency with my generation's pragmatism. People listened. People cared. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a background character in someone else's story. I was building again. Not a marriage. Not a perfect family. But something honest. Something rooted. I didn't hear from Kimberly. Not directly, at least. But Olivia mentioned, carefully, that things hadn't worked out between her and Matt. He'd lost his job, moved back to Chicago. Left her with a lease she couldn't afford and a silence she couldn't fill. She's back in town, Olivia said. Got a teaching job at the college. She's quieter now. I didn't ask for more. I didn't need more. Because the truth was, I wasn't angry anymore. I was relieved. She hadn't been my person. And maybe I hadn't been hers. But that didn't make me worthless. It made me free. And freedom was fertile ground. By autumn, Terraform had grown. We had a modest backlog of clients and a decent local reputation. We even got written up in a Green Living magazine. The article quoted me as saying, sometimes the strongest roots grow after the fire. And I meant it, because I'd been burned to the foundation. But what rose from the ashes was something better. Not flashier. Not more romantic. Just real. And that was enough. 2 years passed. I didn't hear from Kimberly during that time, not directly. Life had moved forward, and so had I. Terraform had grown into a respected local brand. Olivia and I worked well together, balancing each other's ideas and energy. We weren't just father and daughter anymore, we were partners, creators, a team. Then, one afternoon, Olivia came by with something in her hand. A small leather-bound journal. She looked hesitant. "It's Mom's," she said quietly. I didn't snoop. She left it out. She set it on the work table and flipped to a bookmarked page. I didn't want to read it. I wasn't sure I cared. But she looked at me, not as a child seeking permission, but as a woman offering peace. I read one line. I always knew Trevor wasn't my person, but I was afraid of being alone. The words hit like a final, soft slap. Sharp, but oddly liberating. I handed the journal back. "I don't need more reasons," I said. She nodded, and that was it. No drama, no explanation, just clarity. At the same time, I met Julia. She was introduced to me through a mutual client, an urban planner focused on green public spaces. At first, it was all business, site meetings, logistics, budgets. But slowly, something gentler took root. She wasn't like Kimberly. She didn't speak in riddles or withhold affection. Julia asked questions and actually listened. When she laughed, it wasn't performative, it was warm, calm. We started having coffee after meetings, then dinners. No pressure, no illusions. Just two people figuring out if they could exist side by side. And over time, we did. I didn't call it love. I didn't need to. What mattered was the peace it brought. I wasn't chasing passion. I was choosing presence. 5 years after the divorce, I hosted a small gathering at my home. Nothing extravagant. Just a backyard dinner beneath paper lanterns and soft music playing from a Bluetooth speaker. Olivia was there, arm in arm with her fiancé. My team came too, clients, friends, people who had become my community. And Julia stood beside me, effortlessly blending in, effortlessly mine. As the evening unfolded, I looked around at the faces lit by candlelight and laughter, and I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Settled. I thought back to the moment Kimberly looked me in the eyes and said, "You're no longer needed." At the time, it shattered me. Now, I smiled. She was right. I wasn't needed there. I was needed here, among the people who chose me not out of obligation but belief. I had lost a marriage, lost a version of myself. But in that space I'd built a new one, stronger, truer, rooted not in what I was supposed to be, but in who I'd become. And I was finally home.